From the outside, Dr. Arjun Malhotra was the kind of man many in the Indian-American community in Los Angeles admired. He carried himself with confidence, dressed in sharp tailored suits, and drove a sleek black Mercedes that seemed to announce his success before he even stepped out. His reputation preceded him. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him, and relatives back in Punjab pointed to him as the family's shining example of what hard work and sacrifice in America could achieve. But Arjun's journey to that polished life had not been easy. Born into a modest family in Chandigarh, India, he was the eldest of 3 siblings. His father worked as a government clerk, his mother a schoolteacher. Money was always tight, but there was never any doubt about where the family's resources would go, into Arjun's education. He was bright, ambitious, and determined to rise above the middle-class ceiling that kept so many of his peers in place. Medicine became his ticket. For years, his parents sacrificed comforts so Arjun could study, often going without vacations or luxuries. His acceptance into a U.S. residency program was celebrated not just in his home, but across the extended family. When he boarded the plane to California in his mid-20s, he carried not only his own dreams but the hopes of dozens of relatives who believed he would lift the family name into a new league. The United States, however, was not the glamorous picture he had imagined. Residency was grueling, sleepless nights, endless rotations, and constant pressure to perform better than his American-trained peers. But Arjun had grit. He learned quickly, adapted, and soon carved a space for himself as a dependable, skillful physician. Over the years, he earned promotions, better pay, and eventually permanent residency. Along this journey, he married Priya Sharma. Their match was partly arranged by family introductions, but it blossomed into something resembling love. Priya was gentle, intelligent, and eager to support Arjun's ambitions. When she joined him in Los Angeles, she left behind her own budding career in India to be the pillar of his household. In the early years, they were partners in every sense. She helped him manage finances, encouraged him during long nights, and stood proudly by his side when he finally purchased their suburban home in Glendale. But success came at a cost. Arjun's schedule consumed him. He was constantly on call, often away for 12 to 14 hours at a stretch. By the time he came home, he was too exhausted to talk, too drained to listen. Priya, who had envisioned building a family together, found herself increasingly lonely. She tried to fill the void with community gatherings, temple visits, and small part-time jobs, but the absence of her husband gnawed at her. Their conversations grew shallow, their physical intimacy dwindled, and slowly their marriage began to feel less like a partnership and more like a formality. It was in this space of emotional emptiness that Nina Patel entered Arjun's life. Nina was a newly hired nurse in his department, 27 years old, energetic, and strikingly attractive in a way that drew attention the moment she walked into a room. Unlike many of her colleagues, she didn't just see Arjun as a senior physician, she admired him. She listened to his stories, laughed at his dry humor, and asked questions that made him feel interesting again. For Arjun, the admiration was intoxicating. At home, he was met with silence or subtle resentment. At the hospital, he was a hero, and Nina, with her wide eyes and effortless charm, became the embodiment of everything he felt he was missing. Their interactions began innocently enough. A shared coffee during a long shift, a quick text about a patient case that drifted into personal chatter. Over time, their conversations grew longer, more intimate, filled with late-night confessions and flirtatious undertones. Nina's admiration turned to infatuation. Arjun's curiosity became desire. It didn't take long for the boundaries to blur. A lingering touch in the corridor, a stolen kiss after a late shift. Soon, what had started as friendship had escalated into a full-blown affair, carefully hidden from colleagues but undeniable in its intensity. For Arjun, Nina reignited something he thought he had lost, the thrill of being wanted. She made him feel alive, powerful, and desired in a way his marriage no longer did. But with every secret meeting, every lie told to Priya about extra shifts, he dug himself deeper into a dangerous double life. What began as a distraction soon became an addiction, and like all addictions, it would demand a price. Priya Malhotra had always trusted her husband. For years, she defended Arjun's long hours, his late-night calls, his constant exhaustion. She told friends who raised their eyebrows, "He's a doctor. His work is demanding. That's what I signed up for." But in the quiet of her Los Angeles home, Priya's doubts began to grow. It started with small things, changes that seemed too subtle to be accidents. Arjun was suddenly more protective of his phone, carrying it everywhere, even into the bathroom. His shirt smelled of cologne he hadn't worn in years, freshly applied before emergency shifts. His mood alternated between bursts of energy and cold detachment. At first, Priya dismissed these suspicions as paranoia. After all, she had given up so much to build a life with him. Divorce wasn't an option in her world. Betrayal wasn't even something she could imagine. But soon, the evidence became impossible to ignore. One evening, Arjun returned home unusually late. He claimed he had been called in for a complicated procedure. Exhausted, he tossed his jacket on the sofa and went to shower. As she hung up his coat, Priya's fingers brushed against a folded slip of paper in the pocket. A hotel receipt. The name wasn't his, it was Nina Patel's. Priya froze, her pulse quickened. The receipt confirmed what her gut had been screaming for weeks. Arjun wasn't at the hospital, he was somewhere else with someone else. That night when Arjun climbed into bed, Priya lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every memory of their marriage played through her mind: the wedding in Chandigarh, the sacrifices she made to move across the world, the endless hours of loneliness in Los Angeles. The man beside her wasn't the same man she had married. Still, she hesitated. She wanted to be wrong. She wanted a reasonable explanation. The truth came a week later. Arjun had fallen asleep after a long shift, his phone resting loosely on the nightstand. For the first time in months, Priya's curiosity overpowered her restraint. With trembling hands, she unlocked it, praying she wouldn't find what she feared. What she saw shattered her world. Hundreds of messages from Nina. Late-night confessions, flirtatious emojis, explicit exchanges that left no doubt. Priya's breath caught in her throat. She dropped the phone, shaking, her stomach churning. The reality was undeniable. Her husband was having an affair with a younger woman from his own hospital. Her mind spun with rage, grief, humiliation. For years she had sacrificed her own dreams for him. And now this betrayal. When she confronted him the next morning, her voice cracked with both fury and heartbreak. "Who is she, Arjun? Don't lie to me, I've seen the messages." Arjun's face paled. For a moment the mask of confidence cracked. He tried denial first. The messages were taken out of context. Nina was just a colleague. But Priya refused to back down. The evidence was overwhelming. Cornered, Arjun shifted tactics. He admitted there had been something, but insisted it was meaningless. A distraction. A phase. He swore it was over, begged her to forgive him, promised to change. But Priya knew better. She had seen the intimacy of those messages. The tone, the frequency. This wasn't a fling. This was a relationship. The confrontation left their marriage in tatters. At home, silence replaced laughter. Meals were eaten in tense quiet. When they did speak, it ended in shouting, accusations, or cold dismissals. Priya couldn't look at him without remembering every word she had read on that phone. And then came the humiliation outside their home. The Indian community in Los Angeles was tight-knit, and gossip spread like wildfire. Priya began to notice the whispers. Women at temple avoided her gaze. Friends who once invited them to dinner stopped calling. Even relatives in India had begun phoning, their voices heavy with unspoken questions. Priya realized she wasn't just betrayed, she was being pitied. And that, in many ways, was worse. Her anger grew darker. She threatened to leave him, to expose him, to take everything in divorce. But part of her still hoped he would choose her, choose their marriage over his reckless affair. Arjun, however, wasn't ready to give up Nina. When Priya pressed him to cut ties completely, he avoided her, deflected, and worked longer hours. He still slipped away for late-night hospital emergencies, still returned home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. For Priya, the betrayal was no longer private. It was public. Her husband's infidelity wasn't just an insult. It was a stain on her identity, her family name, her entire life. She made a decision. If he wouldn't end the affair, she would, by any means necessary. What Priya didn't know was that Nina wasn't going anywhere. She wanted more from Arjun, and she wasn't afraid to push for it. The stage was set. The triangle of secrets, shame, and desire was tightening, and soon someone was bound to break. Affairs often begin in shadows, but they rarely stay hidden for long. What started as stolen kisses in hospital corridors was now unraveling into a dangerous entanglement that threatened to consume all three lives. For Nina Patel, the relationship with Dr. Arjun Malhotra was intoxicating. At 27, she had her whole career ahead of her, but what she craved most was recognition, to feel seen, chosen, special. With Arjun, she didn't just feel like another nurse on the ward. He made her feel important, valued, adored. But the secrecy began to gnaw at her. She didn't want to be the hidden mistress. She wanted dinners in public, weekends away, the title of partner instead of whispered phone calls at midnight. More than anything, she wanted Arjun to choose her openly, fully, completely. At first, her requests were subtle. Why don't we go away for the weekend, somewhere people won't know us? Can you come to my apartment instead of the hotel? But soon, they turned into demands. Leave her, Arjun. You know you're not happy. I won't wait forever. You can't keep me in the shadows. Arjun, however, wasn't prepared for that kind of upheaval. To him, the affair was passion, escape, not replacement. His entire life, his reputation, his family name rested on the foundation of his marriage to Priya. Divorce wasn't just a personal failure. In the Indian diaspora, it was social suicide. He tried to appease both women, balancing lies like a juggler with too many knives in the air. With Priya, he swore it was over, begged for patience, and promised to change. With Nina, he whispered that he loved her, that he just needed more time, that she should trust him. But the cracks were widening. Priya wasn't staying silent anymore. Her anger boiled over into sharp words and threats. She accused him of humiliating her, of dragging her into the dirt in front of their community. She threatened divorce, financial ruin, public shame, and Arjun knew she meant it. At the same time, Nina was pushing harder. She began calling his phone during family dinners, sending texts at odd hours that Priya sometimes intercepted. Once, she even showed up near his house, waiting in her car just to see him sneak out. The walls were closing in. Arjun's colleagues at the hospital had begun to notice. A lingering glance exchanged across the ward, a hand brushing too long against a shoulder. The gossip spread quickly among nurses and junior doctors. One colleague even pulled Arjun aside. Be careful, people are talking. You don't want this getting out. But it was too late. The rumors had already leaked into the community. Priya's humiliation deepened with every whispered conversation she overheard at social gatherings. At a friend's dinner party, she caught two women exchanging knowing looks when Arjun excused himself to take a work call. At the temple, she heard the soft hiss of her name followed by sudden silence as she walked past. Priya's pain transformed into fury. She confronted Nina directly. One afternoon, she marched into the hospital, her voice shaking with rage. Stay away from my husband. Do you understand? You will destroy everything. But Nina wasn't intimidated. She looked Priya in the eye and said coolly, Maybe you should ask your husband what he really wants, because he keeps coming back to me. That moment burned into Priya's memory. It wasn't just betrayal, it was open mockery. At home, the Malhotra household became a war zone. Nights filled with shouting, tears, and slammed doors. Arjun, caught in the crossfire, tried to maintain control, but his lies were collapsing under their own weight. The more Priya threatened to expose him, the more desperate he became. He begged her to stay quiet, pleaded that his reputation, his license, his entire career depended on secrecy. But Priya had reached her breaking point. She told him plainly, If you don't end it, I will. I'll go to your hospital. I'll tell them everything. I'll ruin you before you ruin me. Meanwhile, Nina's demands escalated. Some say she claimed she might be pregnant. though whether true or manipulative, no one ever confirmed. Others believed she was ready to expose the affair herself if Arjun didn't act. For Arjun, the walls were now closing in from all directions. A furious wife threatening exposure. A relentless mistress demanding commitment. A community already whispering behind his back. He had built his life on control, over patience, over his career, over his reputation. But now he was trapped in a triangle of his own making, and control was slipping through his fingers. The pressure mounted like a ticking bomb. Every argument with Priya ended with ultimatums. Every meeting with Nina ended with demands. Every day at the hospital carried the risk of public exposure. It was only a matter of time before something or someone snapped. And when it did, the consequences would be irreversible. By late summer, the fragile balance Arjun Malhotra had maintained was collapsing. His double life had become unsustainable, and every path forward seemed to lead to ruin. At home, Priya was no longer the patient, devoted wife. She was cold, seething, and calculating. Nights were filled with silence so heavy it was suffocating. When she did speak, her words were daggers. "You've humiliated me. You've ruined our name. If you think I'll stay quiet, you're mistaken." She began gathering evidence, text messages, call logs, even a private investigator who confirmed what she already knew. For Priya, it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about revenge, about making Arjun pay for reducing her to gossip in the community. Nina, on the other hand, had grown more reckless. No longer content with secrecy, she wanted acknowledgement. She wanted a future. Her late-night calls turned into ultimatums. "If you don't tell her, I will. I won't be hidden forever." At one point, she even showed up at a party Arjun and Priya were attending. Though she didn't confront them directly, her presence was a clear signal. "I'm not going away." For Arjun, the pressure was unbearable. At work, he was distracted, short-tempered, and visibly unraveling. Patients noticed. Colleagues whispered. Even his senior partner suggested he take some time off. Inside his mind, the walls were closing in. Divorce meant losing everything. His career, his reputation, his finances. Exposure at the hospital could end his license. Losing Nina meant humiliation, rejection, and the collapse of the fantasy he clung to so desperately. He told himself he could still fix it, that with one decisive act, he could regain control. But what he was really doing was spiraling into a dangerous state of desperation. The breaking point came one humid August evening. Priya confronted him after discovering another string of late-night messages from Nina. This time, there was no shouting, just icy finality in her voice. "Tomorrow I'm going to the board. I'll tell them everything. You won't just lose me, Arjun. You'll lose your career, your name, your life as you know it." Her words landed like a death sentence. Arjun felt his chest tighten, his vision blur. For years he had been the one in control, the respected surgeon, the man people admired. Now he was about to be exposed not as a healer, but as a fraud, a cheater, a liar. Something inside him snapped. Later, investigators would debate whether the violence was premeditated or a sudden burst of rage. But one fact was undeniable. That night, the Malhotra household turned into a crime scene. Neighbors reported hearing screams, then silence. A light left on in the kitchen, a door slamming. By morning, Priya Patel Malhotra, once the elegant, devoted wife, was dead. And Arjun's carefully constructed world lay in ruins, shattered beyond repair. The Malhotra residence, usually pristine and silent, became a tableau of horror on the morning Priya's body was found. It was Priya's sister, Anjali, who first grew concerned. She had tried calling several times that morning, but there was no response. Priya was meticulous about answering her phone, especially after the escalating tension in her marriage. By noon, Anjali drove to the house herself, her unease mounting with every unanswered call. When she arrived, the front door was locked but not bolted. The silence inside was unsettling. Calling her sister's name, she stepped into the living room and felt an unfamiliar chill, not from the air but from the atmosphere. It was in the bedroom, where she discovered the unimaginable. Priya lay sprawled across the bed, her silk nightgown torn, her face battered. Bruises circled her neck, clear evidence of strangulation. On the floor, a shattered lamp hinted at a violent struggle. Anjali's scream pierced the quiet neighborhood. Within minutes, neighbors gathered and someone dialed emergency services. When first responders arrived, the scene spoke volumes. The position of the body, the scattered objects, the broken lamp, all told a story of rage, desperation, and fatal violence. But what stood out most was the absence of forced entry. Whoever had killed Priya hadn't broken into the home. They had been let in, or perhaps they already lived there. Detectives from the local homicide unit quickly cordoned off the house. Photographs were taken. Evidence bags filled with fragments of a life destroyed. A half-empty glass of wine on the nightstand, a crumpled phone hidden under the sheets, faint fingerprints on the lamp base. The first theory was straightforward: domestic violence. Arjun Malhotra was, after all, the only other resident of the house. He was also conspicuously absent when police arrived. Officers tracked him down at the hospital later that day. He appeared disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice defensive. When told of his wife's death, he reacted with shock, but investigators noted how quickly his grief shifted into explanations. "I wasn't home, I was at the hospital, you can check the records." But his alibi was shaky. Security footage placed him leaving the hospital early the night before. His car was spotted near the residence at the time neighbors reported hearing screams. The inconsistencies raised red flags. Meanwhile, the autopsy painted a grim picture. Priya had fought back fiercely. Defensive wounds covered her arms and hands, but the fatal cause was clear: manual strangulation delivered with enough force to crush cartilage in her throat. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned investigators. This was no impulsive shove or accidental fall. It was deliberate, sustained violence. Detectives began piecing together the couple's history. Interviews with friends, colleagues, and family revealed a marriage crumbling under infidelity. Priya had confided in her sister that she was considering going public with Arjun's affair. Colleagues confirmed rumors of his relationship with a younger nurse. And then came the most damning revelation: text messages retrieved from Priya's phone. In the days leading up to her death, she had messaged a friend, writing, "If something happens to me, it will be because of him. I'm not safe anymore." That single line shifted the investigation from suspicion to certainty. By the end of the week, detectives had a working theory. Motive: Priya threatened to expose him, risking his career and reputation. Opportunity: he was home the night of the murder. Evidence: signs of a struggle, defensive wounds, and his shaky alibi. Arjun was no longer just the grieving husband. He was the prime suspect. But there was still one loose thread: Nina Patel. Her name surfaced repeatedly during interviews. Some said she was the cause of the marital fights. Others whispered that she had given Arjun an ultimatum. The police began to wonder, was she merely the mistress or something more? As they widened the investigation, the love triangle that had remained a private scandal was about to explode into a public tragedy. When detectives first heard the name Nina Patel, it was little more than a footnote in a spiraling investigation. But as they dug deeper, it became clear she wasn't just a mistress on the sidelines. She was central to understanding why Priya Malhotra had ended up dead. Nina was summoned to the station 2 days after the discovery of Priya's body. She arrived nervous, her hands trembling as she clutched a small purse. Unlike Arjun, who carried himself with the authority of a surgeon even under questioning, Nina seemed fragile on edge and desperately aware of the weight of her involvement. The detectives began gently. They asked about her relationship with Arjun, how long it had been going on, and what she knew about his marriage. At first, Nina downplayed it, calling it a casual relationship. But her phone records told a different story: hundreds of calls, late-night texts, and weekend rendezvous. Pressed further, she broke down. "Yes, I loved him," she admitted, tears spilling down her face. But I never wanted this. I never wanted anyone dead. Still, her statements revealed crucial information. She admitted giving Arjun an ultimatum: leave Priya or end things with her. She confessed to heated arguments, where she told him she was tired of being the other woman. And she acknowledged knowing Priya was threatening to expose him. For investigators, this was a breakthrough. It showed motive, pressure, and emotional volatility. But it also raised questions. Had Nina's demands pushed Arjun over the edge, or was she in some way complicit? The interrogation grew sharper. Did you see him the night of the murder? Did you know what he was planning? Did you want Priya out of the picture? Nina shook her head furiously. No, I wasn't even near the house. I was at my apartment, alone. Her alibi was weak. No witnesses, no one to corroborate her whereabouts. But investigators had no physical evidence tying her to the crime scene. What they did have were text messages. On the night of Priya's murder, Nina had messaged Arjun. Either you tell her or I will. I'm done being patient. That timestamp placed immense pressure on Arjun, just hours before Priya was killed. Public perception of Nina was ruthless. The media painted her as a seductress who had destroyed a marriage and indirectly caused a woman's death. Community members whispered about her in grocery stores, condemned her at temple gatherings, and treated her as though she had blood on her hands. But the law required more than gossip. Without direct evidence, detectives couldn't charge her. Instead, she became the prosecution's star witness. The woman who could testify about Arjun's lies, his volatility, and his desperation to silence Priya. In the weeks that followed, Nina's life crumbled. She was suspended from the hospital, facing disciplinary review. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Alone, ostracized, and burdened with guilt, she told investigators in one interview, "If I had just walked away, maybe she'd still be alive." Her words captured the tragic essence of the case. Nina hadn't laid her hands on Priya, but her presence in Arjun's life was the accelerant. Her love had become his obsession, her demands his breaking point, her involvement the thread that unraveled everything. For the detectives, one thing was certain. While Nina Patel wasn't the killer, her testimony would be the nail in Arjun Malhotra's coffin. The love triangle had started as passion, turned into betrayal, and now stood as the foundation of a murder trial that promised to grip the entire community. The decision to arrest Dr. Arjun Malhotra came after weeks of mounting evidence. Detectives had his shaky alibi, forensic proof of a violent struggle, and most damning of all, a string of messages showing both motive and opportunity. On a rainy Thursday morning, officers arrived at the hospital where Arjun was preparing for surgery. The moment was surreal. A man who had once commanded authority in the operating theater now stood frozen as plainclothes detectives approached. "Dr. Malhotra, you are under arrest for the murder of your wife, Priya Malhotra." The words echoed down the sterile hallway. Nurses gasped. Junior doctors exchanged glances. Some looked away, unable to reconcile the healer they admired with the accused killer standing before them. Arjun didn't resist, but his face tightened with indignation. "This is a mistake," he said firmly. "I didn't kill my wife." Handcuffed and led out of the hospital, he passed through a gauntlet of flashing cameras. News had spread quickly, tipped off by a leak. Reporters were already waiting outside, microphones extended like weapons. The story was irresistible to the media. A respected Indian surgeon in Los Angeles, a glamorous wife, a younger mistress, and a murder born of scandal. Headlines screamed across television screens and newspaper front pages. Prominent doctor arrested in wife's murder, mistress at center of scandal. Love triangle turns deadly in Indian-American community. From healing hands to murder suspect, surgeon's double life exposed. Within hours, the case dominated news cycles. Talk shows dissected every angle. True crime podcasts speculated about motives. Online forums lit up with debates. Was Arjun a cold-blooded killer or a man driven to the edge by a crumbling marriage? The Indian diaspora community in California was deeply shaken. To many, Arjun had been a symbol of success, a man who had risen from humble beginnings to build a life of wealth and prestige. Now, aunties whispered in temples, uncles debated in coffee shops, and families argued at dinner tables. Some defended him. He was under pressure. Who knows what really happened behind closed doors? Others condemned him. No excuse. He killed his wife. That's the end of it. For Priya's family, the arrest was both a relief and a new wound. Her sister Anjali, still raw with grief, told reporters outside the courthouse. She trusted him, she gave him her life, and he took it away. We want justice, nothing less. Meanwhile, Nina Patel was thrust into an unwanted spotlight. Though she wasn't charged, her name appeared in every headline. Paparazzi followed her to grocery stores. Strangers hurled insults in public. At the hospital, colleagues avoided her, some whispering that she should leave the city altogether. In one interview, a journalist bluntly asked, "Do you feel responsible for Priya Malhotra's death?" Nina's voice cracked as she replied, "I never wanted this. I loved him, yes, but I never asked for blood. I live with guilt every day." Her tears made for gripping television, but they did little to shift public opinion. To many, she was the temptress whose affair had pushed a man to murder. As pre-trial hearings began, the courthouse steps became a theater of chaos. Protesters carried signs demanding justice for Priya. Others held placards insisting Arjun was innocent until proven guilty. The press swarmed the scene daily, desperate for a new angle. Through it all, Arjun maintained his composure. In court, dressed in crisp suits, he projected the image of a man wronged by circumstance. His lawyers claimed Priya's death was a tragic accident, the result of a heated argument gone wrong, not premeditated murder. They painted him as a respected doctor whose private turmoil was being sensationalized by the press. But behind the spectacle, the truth remained chilling. A marriage destroyed by betrayal, a mistress caught in the crossfire, and a woman whose life ended violently in the one place she should have felt safe, her home. The stage was set for a trial that promised to reveal not just the details of a brutal crime, but the dark undercurrents of ambition, love, and obsession that had driven it. The trial of Dr. Arjun Malhotra opened in a packed Los Angeles courtroom. For months, the case had dominated headlines, and now the public was hungry to witness the drama unfold in real time. Reporters jostled for seats, sketch artists sharpened their pencils, and every detail, from Arjun's tailored suit to his expressionless face, was dissected in the press. The prosecution wasted no time framing their narrative. Arjun was a man consumed by greed, pride, and lust. He had everything: wealth, respect, a loyal wife, yet he threw it away for a secret affair. When Priya threatened to expose him, they argued, he killed her to protect his reputation. In his opening statement, the district attorney painted a chilling picture. "This is not a story of an accident," he declared, pacing before the jury. "This is a story of deliberate violence. A woman threatened to reveal the truth about her husband's double life, and in response, he silenced her forever." He pointed to the evidence: Priya's defensive wounds, the bruises around her neck, and text messages proving she feared for her life. He described Arjun's motive as clear as day: the collapse of his carefully curated world. Arjun's defense team countered with equal force. They portrayed him as a respected doctor and community figure, a man under immense personal strain but incapable of calculated murder. Yes, there had been marital conflict, they admitted, but Priya's death was framed as a tragic accident, a heated argument that spiraled out of control. "Dr. Malhotra loved his wife," the defense attorney said firmly. "He did not plan her death. He did not plot against her. This was a marriage in crisis, yes, but not a murder." The courtroom braced for what came next: the witnesses. First to testify was Anjali Patel, Priya's sister. Her voice trembled as she described discovering Priya's lifeless body. She recounted conversations where Priya confessed she feared for her safety. One message, preserved on her phone, was read aloud: "If something happens to me, it will be because of him." The words hung heavy in the air, and several jurors visibly shifted in their seats. Next came colleagues from the hospital. They testified about Arjun's increasingly erratic behavior, his visible tension with Priya, and his not-so-secret relationship with Nina Patel. One nurse recalled seeing Nina and Arjun sharing an embrace in the hospital parking lot, a detail that deepened the jury's understanding of the affair's intensity. But the most anticipated testimony came from Nina Patel herself. When she took the stand, the courtroom was electric. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Her appearance was strikingly vulnerable. Dressed modestly, she spoke softly, often pausing as though the weight of her words threatened to crush her. She admitted to the affair, admitted to giving Arjun ultimatums, and admitted that on the night of the murder, she had texted him demanding he tell Priya the truth. "I never wanted Priya harmed," she insisted. "I just wanted him to choose. I never thought it would come to this." The prosecution used her testimony to highlight Arjun's motive: a mistress demanding commitment and a wife threatening exposure, pressures that converged fatally. The defense, however, tried to paint Nina as manipulative, a jealous woman who wanted Priya out of the picture. They suggested she had more influence over Arjun than she admitted, subtly planting seeds of doubt about whether she had played a larger role. Still, Nina's account of Arjun's promises and pleas resonated with the jury. She described how he often said, "I can't lose everything. If she ruins me, my life is over." Those words, the prosecutor argued, revealed his mindset, a man ready to kill to protect his pride. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became theater. Exhibits flashed on screens, photographs of the crime scene, screenshots of text exchanges, even the broken lamp used in the struggle. Jurors studied every detail. Outside, the media frenzy only grew. News vans lined the courthouse, anchors delivered live updates, and hashtags trended worldwide. Some portrayed Arjun as a fallen hero, others as a cold-blooded murderer. Nina was vilified as the other woman, while Priya was memorialized as the tragic victim of betrayal. Inside, however, one truth was undeniable. The case was no longer just about forensics or timelines. It was about human emotion, pride, passion, jealousy, and desperation, and how those forces had collided with deadly consequences. And as closing arguments loomed, the jury faced the daunting task of deciding whether Arjun Malhotra was guilty of premeditated murder, or simply a man destroyed by a tragic mistake. After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and emotional appeals, the fate of Dr. Arjun Malhotra lay in the hands of 12 jurors. The courtroom was silent as they filed back in, their expressions unreadable. Arjun sat rigid, his eyes fixed on the judge. His defense team whispered reassurances, but he barely heard them. Across the aisle, Priya's family clutched one another's hands, bracing for justice. The clerk stood. "In the matter of the people versus Arjun Malhotra on the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Priya's sister Anjali wept openly, her grief mixed with relief. For her, this was not victory but closure, proof that Priya's voice had not been silenced in vain. Arjun's face drained of color. For months, he had convinced himself that charm, status, and legal skill could save him. But the reality struck with brutal force. He would spend decades behind bars. The judge's sentence was swift and stern. "Dr. Malhotra, you betrayed your oath as a husband and as a man trusted by this community. You will serve 25 years to life in state prison." The words sealed his downfall. From a celebrated surgeon to a convicted murderer, his legacy was reduced to scandal and shame. For Nina Patel, the verdict brought no relief. Though she had not been charged, she was forever marked by the case. Her name, splashed across tabloids, became synonymous with betrayal. She left the hospital, unable to face colleagues who whispered behind her back. Friends drifted away. Alone, she carried the burden of knowing her relationship had helped ignite a deadly chain of events. In interviews, she admitted, "I loved him, but love turned into a nightmare. I'll never forgive myself for what happened." For Priya's family, justice was bittersweet. They mourned the life she never got to live, the children she never had, the years stolen from her. Yet they honored her memory through community work, speaking about domestic violence and the dangers of hidden abuse. The wider community was left stunned. The case became a cautionary tale, dissected in living rooms and lecture halls alike. How could a man who saved lives in the operating room take one so brutally at home? How could love turn into something so deadly? In the end, the trial was more than a legal battle. It was a tragic story of ambition, pride, passion, and betrayal. A reminder that beneath polished facades, darkness can fester. And for Arjun Malhotra, once a man of healing, his legacy would forever be defined not by the lives he saved, but by the life he destroyed.